We're here to talk about one of the more interesting topics that you talk about in the offseason. Who is the best pitcher of all time? And what does that even mean? Are we talking about the best game ever? Are we talking about the best season, the best group of seasons, or the best career? And we're going to go through some stats and just look at pitchers in a bunch of different ways to try and determine who we think is the best pitcher of all time. And more than welcome to chime in, any of y'all in the comments. So to kick it off, Mike, why don't you lay some groundwork, or let's see how you chopped it up a little bit.
Man, we've been talking about having this conversation for a long time. Usually it's during the season, so we don't have time to take a breath, and the numbers are changing and we're distracted. But what does the best ever mean? Sometimes we're talking about Pedro or Maddux or Randy or someone at best ever, but what does it mean? Does it mean the whole body of work? Is it a season, 2 seasons? Is it one game? Can you say at any point in time that this guy right now, at any point in, let's just say the last 50 or 60 years, was the best ever?
And we're not going to go as far back as like Walter Johnson, because looking at his stats, I mean, I think you can make a strong argument he's the best ever in accordance with like looking at a whole career stat wise, but we don't have a lot on that. We don't know the competition level, a whole bunch of things. Does it stand up to today's game? But objectively, stat wise, like that would be my vote. If someone said to me someone said Walter Johnson was the best pitcher ever, I wouldn't argue with them. I'd say, yeah, could be.
When I went to put my dip my foot in the pool, I went back about 60 years. A little bit after they had expanded in 1961. I was tempted to stop. I was tempted not to look past when the mound was higher. Now I'll throw you one that I was going to save, but I'll just throw it out there. I think you had a post about him the other day, but J.R. Richard at the end was maybe. I mean, at the end we hadn't seen numbers like that. No one got any extra base hits off him ever. He was just completely tearing it up. And that might sound crazy when you kind of look against maybe a Maddux or a Randy, but I don't know. When you go back and look at the numbers, it's like for that shorter period, 20, 30 starts or whatever, hard to beat for this period of time.
Not only that, but going back and looking at his stuff, you're talking about stuff that looked like it was transported back from today's game into the late 70s, early 80 time frame. We're having a 101 mile an hour fastball and a 94 mile an hour slider that he threw in the All-Star game. And we don't know that was the best he had because radar guns were, scattered around the league. It still wasn't in every game like it is today. We didn't measure everything the same way. But it's absurd. And a 6'8" monster of a man throwing that stuff. I can't imagine what that looked like to players. And even talking to Nolan Ryan about him, he was like, oh yeah, there was a time where J.R. Richard was, one of the most scary guys to face in baseball. And you're talking about Nolan Ryan saying that about JR.
We'll just throw out, I can't remember if you mentioned Koufax already, but he's got to, if you're going to go back 60 years, you probably got to start with him at the beginning of that era. What I see, 100 starts with an ERA of 178, 100 start span, 178 ERA. And we know that at the end, he was as good as anybody. How much do you discount for where he was pitching and all that? That's a matter, some opinion there, but when you watched, did you think he was the best ever up to that point? Some people were saying yes.
Yeah. So I think that's a great point. You take the anecdotal stuff as well. And if you asked anybody that played against Sandy Koufax, as well as the esteem they hold him in as being just, a god among pitchers.
Very true.
I would definitely put him in the conversation.
Yeah, that whole era was weird when they lowered the mound. Gibson had that otherworldly 68 with 13 shutouts, and God knows that's that string where he just gave nothing up. But even when the mound changed, his ERA went up a point. Okay, now it's in the low 2s. Those 2 seasons for Bob Gibson have to be somewhere on the list. Again, anecdotal, and watching the World Series and all that stuff is like just completely dominant.
And I would say his stuff holds up as well. Going there and looking back at his slider, his mechanics, kind of everything about the intimidation factor. And do we hold it against a guy, or is it in his credit that he was mainly credited with the lowering of the mound? Like his dominant season forced a change in the game, because we're like, it's almost like tiger proofing golf courses when, with Tiger Woods. That's how phenomenal the guy was in almost maybe not a Babe Ruth as a hitter type fashion, but ahead of his.
Yeah, as much as any pitcher, I agree with you. Yeah, I mean, he didn't necessarily lower the mound just for him, but if there's any one pitcher, by far it was him. I mean, that season, that MVP season he has, is incredible. So that era, that early 70s, I mean, you take a guy who you're not going to say was the best ever. You're not even going to pause, but was so great, like a Fergie Jenkins. I mean, what a body of work that was, right?
Absolutely.
So
he doesn't get a lot of credit, as much credit as he deserves.
Right. But you go look at the numbers, you're like, wow, he was great for a long time. Vida Blue, that definitely meets our criteria of like, did anyone think maybe he was the best pitcher ever? In 1971, I mean, they were freaking out in Oakland and everywhere. This young kid is just dominating. So I got a weird one for you. Wilbur Wood. Now, if you're going to look at Wilbur Wood's 1971 season, which is the first season that he started, they had him in the pen before that, and they said, "Oh hell, let's have you start." His WAR, both from Baseball Reference and Fangraphs for 1971, are higher than Bob Gibson's 1968.
Wow, and that's not somebody I would have put in the conversation.
No, but what was it? 334 innings pitched with a sub-2 ERA. It's just a really, really good quality and a ton of quantity. God, the guy, again, both anecdote and just statistical, but Tom Seaver.
So
geez,
I think, as a Hall of Famer, as a guy that got as many higher percentage of Hall of Fame votes as he did, I think, is he like the second highest among Hall of Famers, something like that? Everybody worshiped. He doesn't get nearly as much credit as he deserves today. Everybody is, they're overwhelmed with the flashiness of a Koufax or a Ryan. Ryan would say that Seaver was a better pitcher than him. And I think looking at statistically, you wouldn't argue with that.
I wouldn't.
Yeah.
I wouldn't argue with it.
And nobody talks about him as the Mount Rushmore of great pitchers.
So, I mean, so underrated. He was popping on shorter exams of like, what are the best dozen starts? And then the long ones of like, it's Seaver and Kershaw are the only ones to have, what was it? A sub 250 ERA over like a 400 start string during this period. He was just so good at his worst and great at his greatest. I mean, just what a phenomenal pitcher. And I couldn't agree more. It's sad that Nolan Ryan still is undervalued today, but take Seaver over Ryan for sure.
Yeah, and I don't think Ryan would object to it. You have his video lives up. Like if you watch it, and I don't care who he was playing against, dude threw hard. He had a variety of pitches that his slider was nasty. He had a nice slow curve, a changeup. He actually taught Nolan Ryan his changeup, and was a professional. He was the first guy that actually really took in weightlifting, weight training and stuff, and was made fun of back in the day. An absolute legend. And I would have him on the Mount Rushmore of pitchers. That would be a guy that I would definitely say holds up today too.
Right. When we're done, if we're saying we got 4 pitchers on our Rushmore, let's see.
Yeah, let's hold Seaver, because I would say that it's going to be hard to push him off there for me.
If you had to choose between Seaver and Koufax, would you take Seaver?
I think I would, but I might get struck by lightning.
Right, exactly.
I'm feeling bad about it, but yeah, like going back to those games, I think I would.
This is going to sound like heresy too, but maybe the best season ever is someone we haven't discussed, and that's Steve Carlton.
Yep. And he's another guy doesn't get, because he's overshadowed by Ryan's strikeout run. He was once the all-time strikeout leader too, with a incredible slider. Didn't throw ridiculously hard, but also took the took pitching as a profession, like he was a professional pitcher. Wasn't that well liked by a lot of guys.
I was going to say maybe had something to do with the way he talked to the media.
Yeah, a little bit like that, but definitely you go back and watch his stuff. That slider was nasty.
Oh yeah. What, 27-10 for a 59-97 team? Like, say what?
Right, because I marvel at, like, you look at Shohei's season where he had, how many wins did he have? Is it 13 this year, something like that? I don't
know. I'd have to look.
Yeah,
he had so many weird,
But for a team that he had double the amount of wins of anybody else on the staff this year. And you're talking about Steve Carlton, who had basically half his team's wins in a season. So I don't like wins as a stat. No one really does. But to me, when it stands out that much, and I've used this for Shohei too, yeah, wins isn't great. But there's a point where if you're racking up that many more wins than anybody else on the staff, you're really, really good because your team isn't all that good.
Right. I think it was 40 starts, 39 starts, whatever he had that season for a 59-97 team, and you only lost 10 games is pretty amazing. All things said about one-loss record being influenced. Still, it's way out of whack. If you throw the two versions of WAR together, it's maybe the best ever, or at least in this 60-year span we're talking about.
Interesting. So that season would be the high.
Yeah, well, I think it was at the top when you mash them together. If you take the average of the two wars, there's so many innings pitched, such good quality. Yeah, it's better than Gibson. It's better than some of the Pedro seasons. Now, if you want to, we'll get into Pedro, I'm sure, but Pedro didn't pitch nearly as many innings, so
right,
he's not going to have the WAR.
Well, and it's a great point and a great validation of WAR, because he really did, like, he did carry the team, a terrible team, by having, like, without him, they would have been a lot worse. I mean, the dude won half their games.
Yeah, well, take his record out of theirs, and it's what, 32-87. Oh my God, the Cleveland Spiders.
Yeah, exactly.
Guy in the late 70s who I'm willing to say everyone agreed was the best pitcher, at least during that time he was dominating, was Ron Guidry.
Yes.
Had that really good 78 and right. I mean, at least for a short period of time, we'll say a year, maybe a little more. You're like, yeah, he's the best on the planet right now.
Yeah.
You can't play it against some of the other stuff.
Probably
not.
No. But prove that it's, he's a hard thrower for a little dude and a vicious slider. What was his ERA? His best ERA for a season was like
174.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was over almost 275 innings.
Yeah.
So best on the planet. Everyone thought it. No one knew what the hell was going on when it happened. Was Fernando Valenzuela.
Without a doubt. Yeah.
Two earned runs in his first 83 innings pitched in the majors. 2. And I remember back then too, not knowing a fraction of what I know now, or even how to look at this and going, he broke it. He broke baseball. I'm watching him, and it, like, I don't know if anybody's ever going to hit this guy. That was back then, and people joked about it a little bit, but they were all wondering, like, is this like his permanent performance? Which obviously now we would look at it and go, yeah, I mean, you can't do it forever. You just don't have it. But for a time there, it was a true mania. It was truly, Fernando mania was completely real.
And he still held out to be that legend, almost like a flash in the pan type thing, but he had a good career. Screwball, weird mechanics, like the looking up to the sky, legendary, everything about the dude. Yeah, I mean, if you're looking at kind of rookie greatest of all times, that would be really hard to top, along with someone I just recently tweeted, Mark Fidrich, who threw 24 complete games in his rookie season.
And only 29 starts.
Right. And he started the season. He started starting on May 15th of that year and threw 24 complete games in that season. Like, that's insanity. You never would let anybody do that today. when was 24 complete games? There are great pitchers that don't have that in their career.
Obviously, we're going to talk about Dwight Gooden. And when you go back to Rushmore, when we start talking about, I really want to make a spot for him. Again, career, no. But oh my God, at the beginning of his career. I mean, geez.
Like 84th, 85, 86.
Yeah, 85 was pretty nuts. 153 ERA, 276 innings pitched. He had a solid 84. Was it 83? He had 300 Ks in the minors. I mean, and again, I mean, if you walked around back then and asked like, who's the best pitcher on the planet? I mean, how many people weren't saying it's Dwight Gooden at his peak?
And no one was missing any of his starts. He was electric. His fastball would play today. If you watch it, it was upper 90s, I would say, with an absolute hammer. If you told me you thought Dwight Gooden's curveball was the best curveball of all time, you wouldn't get an argument. I'd say there are other guys. You can bring up other guys. Bert Blyleven's one of them. But would you be wrong if you said Dwight Gooden's curveball was the best of all time? No, you wouldn't be wrong. It's
top three, 100%.
Yeah.
Somewhere in the top three. His skill level, though, at his apex, I mean, his peak, line it up against these other guys. I mean, would you rather have Koufax at his best on the mound for you or Dwight Gooden at his best for you? And you pause and you're like,
I think I'd take Gooden.
So good. Yes.
Yeah, I think I would take Gooden, and that says a lot.
I would too.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So back to real quick of that's why I wanted to have this talk is like, what are the parameters of this best ever? What does it even mean? And by a lot of definitions, Dwight Gooden is on your mountain.
Yeah. If you talk about it at one moment in time, I think we probably have to divide it up into the one moment. Who was the best ever at that point in time that you would honestly say was the best ever? You saw a career that Dwight Gooden was going to have in your mind that he was the best ever at that point.
Right.
And I think most baseball fans would agree with that.
Right. Right. Like we said, I mean, we can joke and say Kerry Wood, and, in the ninth inning of that game, everybody's like, this guy's the best pitcher that ever existed at this moment. But to your point about Gooden, like, we didn't see that. Then again, he was young and we're like, is this what he can do with regularity? So there was a little bit of, obviously a lot of flash there. It's not Gooden-esque, but to see what a guy can do. But Gooden was just like getting everybody out and striking him out, making him look foolish. And you're like, what is this going to look like?
Yeah. Yeah. To your point on Kerry Wood, if you're arguing the best point in time, the best anybody's ever been for a given day,
right?
Is it Kerry Wood? It may be. So for one day, let's say it is Kerry Wood. I don't think there's ever been a game that's been that good. You go back, his stuff is wiffle ball stuff with an upper 90s fastball and incredible movement. It was getting calls that day. Yeah, the strike zone was big, but it was big for everybody back then. Legitimately, one day, again, I'm not going to say you're stupid. As a matter of fact, if you asked me who the best pitcher for any given day was, it was Kerry Wood. Unless you're maybe Greg Maddux.
Maybe Greg Maddux, the only guy you would stop and go, well, actually, he's the next guy on my list. And you look at certain aspects and you're like, no, but man, you can't have watched him. You can't have listened to people talk about him. You can't look at certain numbers and not have him in the discussion for your mountain. You just can't.
I would have a hard time saying he's not on my Mount Rushmore. Having watched a ton of his games, both movement, command, just he was so good at game planning against hitters. My favorite pitcher to watch in a game, without a doubt. Like his stuff, the front hip two-seamer, his changeup. He hated his breaking stuff, but it was still really good. And just the look on his face, like you knew that dude was in command and he was 3 steps ahead of you when he pitched. He never would admit it, even if you talked to him today, would probably say, yeah, it was just luck, I did. But absolutely. He is the definition. If you looked at a master of his craft, that dude would be So that's why he's on the Mount Rushmore to me, is the ultimate pitcher, as you define pitcher, which is the way I didn't define it, which was swing and miss stuff. He is a pitcher of the highest order and had how many strikeouts in his career? 3,000 something strikeouts, which nobody remembers. They think of him as a pitch to contact guy who had well over 3,000 strikeouts in his career.
Here's a guy, I mean, like, we know what we're going to say about him, but Roger Clemens, geez, it's just too bad. He's got this, the asterisk covers the whole name now. And it's just like,
I hate that because
I do too.
Right. It's like 7 Cy Youngs. You look at his stuff, his splitter, at his peak, his splitter was disgusting. He threw hard. He threw hard before steroids. I don't like the idea that the whole thing is you're taking that and just throwing out a dude's career with it. But they're choices guys make too, right? Like,
right.
I can argue either side on that. I could say that baseball never cracked down on how you were training off the field before. It was substance abuse stuff was more like the Steve Howe, like, hey, he's on coke again. It was more about that than anything to do with training. And baseball turned a blind eye to it. And a lot of these guys were later adopters of it because they knew the hitters were doing it. And they're like, well, if they're doing it to me, then I need to counter that. And baseball doesn't care, just like sticky stuff and spin rates.
Absolutely.
So everybody's like, oh, no one's checking on this and other guys are doing it, so maybe I should do it too. It's just one of those things. You have 2 guys that still hold up today. I know you're getting to them. Who are in that?
Who are right? They're on there.
Yeah, and they also may be on my Mount Rushmore, and that would complete it. Unfortunately, I mean, with big units stuff has never been seen before, and Pedro, which is never.
Yeah.
Like,
there's no way you can't have him on your mountain.
Yeah.
The only hesitation I get with, like, you have, I assume Maddux is on your mountain.
Yeah.
I don't know who your 4th guy is yet. We'll get there. And Pedro and Randy. And the only hesitation I have is just that they all kind of pitched around the same kind of time. And
it's weird to look at
it's weird to look at a 60-year period that we're looking at and go, that should they have all pitched at the same time? Does that make sense? Am I looking at this weird? Is it just because I was, of my take on baseball at that time and the numbers there and this and
is
that?
It old guys type of thing, our bias that was, but if you asked me off the top of my head, if I ran a poll on the greatest pitchers of all time, would not at least 3 of them be Pedro, big unit, and Maddux? Like, if I didn't have them in there, all the replies would say, what about those guys? So I don't think we're looking at it wrong, but it's weird because they overlapped.
Very weird. That's the only hesitation I had here. Obviously, all the numbers. Pedro, those 2 seasons. Hold on a minute. It's the pinnacle, the peak of the steroid era. Your half your starts are at Fenway. Maybe the best back-to-back pitching seasons ever. Maybe.
Yeah.
I mean, he didn't pitch as many innings, but my God, you should not. An ERA 2 points higher would have been good.
Right. That's the thing that jumps out to me when you look at who was second. I think it was Roger Clemens might have been second one of those years, and he was like 1.7.
Nowhere near.
Yeah, it was almost like double, double Pedro's ERA. And like, you go back looking at it, nobody had a chance. Like nobody had a chance. He meets my swing and miss criteria with his huge K numbers, his ERAs, sterling, and going back and looking at his stuff. And if you look at his velo was there, he threw upper 90s, changeup off the charts, arguably the best changeup of all time. Certainly one of the best changeups of all time, and one of the best starting pitcher changeups of all time. Probably the best starting pitcher changeup of all time. If I was and his curveball, like I could do a highlight reel of his curveball, and you would say his curveball was the best curveball of all time. I could make his curveball look like the best curveball of all time, even though that was probably his 3rd best pitch. And you would look at it and you see hitters bailing constantly on it. Like, they had no chance against that curveball. And everybody talks about his changeup and fastball. So that's how good that dude is. And if he's not like, I don't think it's worth having a mountain if Pedro's not on your mountain.
No, you definitely did something wrong if he's not. There's no doubt. And like you said, it holds up when you watch clips from him in 99, 2000. You're like, there's something wrong. That is the mound closer. There's something that's a wiffle ball. That's like, it just looked it, and because it was so dominant.
So looking dominant. Back at that, what would you say the biggest reason? Like, it's his arm angle has something to do with it. A kind of a lower slot. His stuff is pure stuff. We don't have movement numbers on his stuff, but the eye test tells you enough on that. His fastball had a lot of movement to it. He was a brilliant, we talk about Maddux being a brilliant pitcher. I don't know that there is a smarter pitcher than Pedro. As far as I had a clip the other day where he was changing grips in mid delivery, and he did this on purpose. So he couldn't tip pitches, that he would switch. His fingers were so messed up that you can switch to his changeup grip or his fastball grip in the middle of his delivery as the ball's out of his glove. And I was like, it's just brilliant. And if you watch him talk about pitchers today, his knowledge holds up. So like, he may be the best pitcher of all time in my head. I enjoy watching him maybe the most of anybody just because of all that, which doesn't, that shouldn't bias it, how much you enjoy it. But he checks all the boxes for me at his peak that he's the best pitcher of all time.
Right. If it's you saying it, it means something. I mean, you said it, it's him or Maddux, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. This is one of my favorite stats, and it just doesn't sound as impressive as it is. 2,003 strikeouts in 200 starts. And everybody, that's 10 a start. That's like, for 200 starts, Randy Johnson.
Yeah.
No one's even close to doing that ever. Not even close. Not Nolan Ryan. No one.
No, and there is his K per 9 at his peak was unbelievable. Command, like, he started off as a crappy pitcher. Like, he would make fun of himself because he didn't know where the ball was going. He's 6'10". He couldn't sync everything up. Once he did, oh my God, like, command was there. The stuff is there. Could he do it today? Yes. A 6'10" guy throwing 100 and
from out there at first base. Yeah.
Right. With that arm slot, with a slider that was like, he had the best slider of all time. Like, if I'm going back and objectively looking at sliders, it was not even a fair thing for him to throw his slider. It was like, he should only be allowed to throw fastballs. If you're Randy Johnson, like, compete with me. You're not allowed to throw anything other than that. Like, undoubtedly one of the best pitchers of all time, could absolutely pitch in any era. Again, another guy, if you threw him back, what would he do? Like, in any era, a 6'10" guy throwing 100 miles an hour is gonna play.
And then Kershaw, I mean, honestly, you got to have him way up the list.
Got to be in the conversation, and he doesn't get enough credit for whatever reason. Like, why doesn't he get enough credit? I mean, he's Clayton Kershaw, and if you look at his career,
does he throw?
Yeah, but he used to throw decently hard. Like, he was 96, 97-ish.
It's not
like,
enough anymore.
I know. Like, I don't.
Not sexy enough.
And even still today, you don't even see him around a 3 ERA. Like, dude is, if he has a 3 ERA, you're like, man, he's washed.
He had a 200 start span of a 203 ERA.
Right.
Come on.
I like, and he just doesn't, he's not flashy. He doesn't, he's just not that guy. But everybody that plays with him knows it. He's another guy that walks on water. He's almost like he's baseball royalty, like a Sandy Koufax is. There's never an inkling of any controversy around the guy unless it's getting pissed off about, somebody stalling his routine or something like that. A legendary guy about routine, taking the game seriously, studying it. He deserves his place in this conversation, but yet I can't my mind is biased against him being on my Mount Rushmore, and it shouldn't be. Like, I know it shouldn't be.
Right. There's something missing. There's not that freakish short-term performance. Like, you don't think he's going to go strike out 17 guys ever.
Right.
And so,
but yet he had one of the most dominant no-hitters of all time. Like,
that's true.
And one of the best games ever pitched.
This is a tough one. deGrom, I don't know what to do with him. When he's healthy, like, he's the fourth guy.
The best pitcher. He's the best pitcher.
Yeah, I mean, it's like best. I mean,
yeah, if you said he was the best, right? Totally.
So to me, it's all about definition. If you're okay, if you're not discounting for health and all that stuff, and just like when he pitched, well, okay. I mean, we've been watching. We know what he does when he. I mean, look at even just last season.
Everybody knows him too.
That's not even real. Yeah.
Yeah, he's one of those guys that all of us that love pitching drop everything we have. There are two guys. I mean, probably two guys that I would say you do that for no matter what. And deGrom is absolutely the most. Like, there, if you miss a deGrom start, like, I have to go back and watch the entire thing again if I miss one, because his command is off the charts. Off the charts, as meaning like he could be a command guy. You can view him. He is a command guy. Jacob deGrom is a command guy that throws 102 with a slider that he spots up exactly where he wants to. Exactly. Like, he does this all the time. It's the whole glove side crap that he does, that everybody knows he's going to do it and no one can do anything about it. He doesn't try to do too much ever. Pitches within himself. Yeah. It's just
that right there.
Yeah.
How much of that ability has been bolstered by he's not trying to move around. He's like, I'm going to go here. I'm going to go here. I'm going to go here. 80% of his pitches are on that side of the plate.
Yeah.
I mean, it's repetitive, but it's like, well, it works there. It works there.
Why would you do it unless you're bored?
Right.
Yeah. And unfortunately, him getting hurt just kills me every year when that happens. Because selfishly, I love watching him pitch, because he's a combination of the command guy and the stuff guy that you can't take your eyes off of. And you know that could be a game where he strikes out 22, and would you be surprised to see him strike out 22? I have toyed around saying deGrom at points is the best pitcher of all time, and you could argue it. Like, at any point in time, he's the best pitcher of all time. Would I put him on my Mount Rushmore? The injury stuff kills me. Like, you can't, and it's because of that.
All right, deGrom or Seaver?
Yeah, like, you can't say deGrom's a better pitcher than you can't.
It just doesn't feel right.
And we haven't talked about Nolan Ryan, have we? Have we gone through him?
We just went past him and said, yeah, he struck a bunch of guys out. Yeah, whatever.
Like legitimately, he would be on a lot of people's Mount Rushmores as the best pitcher of all time, because strikeouts rule.
He's such a tough call. Take his better games, and they're better than everyone's.
Yeah,
they just are. They're mixed in with games that weren't as good. He led an ERA twice, I think. Once was a short season. It's not the only stat to look at, but and I still think he's horribly underrated.
Yeah.
Do I stare at him for the fourth? Yeah, I do. I mean, but we already picked Seaver over Ryan.
Yeah, so I think Ryan would pick Seaver over Ryan if you asked him, probably. Right. That being said, at his best, he was the most feared pitcher in baseball. Was he ever considered the best pitcher in baseball by his peers? And he wasn't, because in the Cy Young Award, he didn't win. He was the most feared pitcher. Right. And he was screwed by that, like, absolutely screwed. And even Jim Palmer spoke out back in the day. Well, he walks too many people, so he can't be that good. Like, yeah, but his stuff, it would play in any era. You look back, I am going to do a highlight. Yeah, I was going to do a highlight of his curveball, which to me is one of the best curveballs of all time. We mentioned Gooden earlier. If you told me Ryan's curveball was the best curveball of all time, would not argue with you. He made people poop their pants when they were facing that. And then later in his career, his changeup was cartoon-like. Like, he had a changeup that nobody talks about that was cartoon-like. And I've done highlights of his changeup, and I don't think people realized how good it is. Like it's a screwball changeup that he just did at the end of his career because he didn't, he's only throwing 94. It was, whatever. Certainly the most romanticized pitcher of all time. And I think people would want to be him over anybody. If I asked you who you wanted to be at his peak, who would you want to be?
And maybe that's how we should be asking it.
Yeah. It might be
at
Nolan
their peak.
Ryan.
Yeah, it might be. I mean,
I love the idea of being 6'10" and throwing like Randy Johnson.
Right.
I love the craftsman like Seaver, but I think most people would say Nolan Ryan. I think actually that's a great poll, right? Like
you should do
who
that.
Would you rather be?
You get to put their skin on, and at their best,
who would you rather be? For one game, I think the answer for the best pitcher of all time for one game is Kerry Wood.
He had the best results. There's no doubt. Remember my point of, did he have the best stuff that day?
Yeah.
Well, right. I mean, you see guys missing it, so sure plays into the. But I know there were better.
A good lineup.
Guys had yeah.
I mean, 20 strikeouts.
That's all we. That's all we can. That's all we can go by.
For a full season, it's probably Pedro. For two seasons, it's Pedro.
I might go Carlton for one, and I might go Pedro for two, if that doesn't sound too crazy.
Yeah, no, I can.
And then if you want to go 3 or 4 or 5, I mean, you might be into Randy.
Right.
I mean, that stretch was just crazy.
Yeah, and then like a full career, it's
in this 60 seasons that we're looking at.
Yeah, like it's, to me, I mean, Randy's way up there still. Greg Maddux is way up there. See, you have to peel off the last few years of these guys' careers because they all pitch longer than they should, as far as if you want to be the guy you thought of as that guy. Seaver did it. Obviously Seaver, all of those guys did it.
All right. Seaver was really good for a long time and did water his numbers down at the end.
Yeah.
But if you want to take like the core, if you want to take like the 60 or 70 or whatever you think core of their career, I mean,
even if you took 10 years, say you take 10-year stretch, was a big stretch. Yeah, it's probably Seaver.
Yeah.
If Randy put it together earlier, he would be undoubtedly
10, but not 10 years, maybe, huh?
Right. Yeah, he had to get there earlier than that.
Yeah. So we know Pedro wasn't not for 10.
No. But Pedro for a good period was
there. Yes.
Yeah, but not 10.
But you want 10 years of Seaver or 10 years of Pedro? Yeah.
Yeah, right.
I mean, at their best. Like, well, it might be Seaver.
Now, where does my Mount Rushmore end up? That's a great question. I don't know. I mean, so my gut instinct tells me I cannot have a Mount Rushmore without Pedro, without Greg Maddux, and without Randy Johnson. I will have them on my Mount Rushmore. The fourth spot is up in the air. And I could argue a lot of people. My bias, this is a bias because I just love Seaver as a craftsman. I end up with Seaver on there, but I could, I think you can make an argument for other folks. What would you look at? What would yours be?
Yeah, I'm just not sure who would crack Seaver. I mean, we've talked about Gooden having a shot at it.
Right. For that very short period of time, Gooden, for more than a short, like you're talking about 3 seasons, basically, right? Or 1 main season and 2 ends of a season.
Yeah. He's just that bubble of, was Gooden better at his peak than Seaver? Maybe a little bit.
Yeah.
Maybe a little bit, maybe not. But maybe not, because Seaver was really, really good in short spans too. So we didn't get to see as much of Seaver. We didn't have the same coverage. A lot of games weren't televised, all that stuff. Maybe not. Maybe not. Well, we discounted deGrom. We're not going to put him up there just because of the injury factor.
He can't be, but I want him to be. Like
if he's healthy for 2 seasons for the Rangers, we get back on the call here and we might do it.
Yeah, if he breaks the all-time record for ERA in a season, which is not beyond what he can do.
It's not.
It's definitely like it's just not.
Which is stupid. Like what we should be saying he's the 4th, but we can't.
Right, we can't.
We just can't do it. Yeah.
Yeah, who would you so are you kind of somewhere on the Mount Rushmore part?
I think so. I see some guys I could throw up against Seaver, but it's hard for me to walk away saying, yeah, I'm picking him over Seaver.
Yeah.
So,
and
again,
it's weird that we had those three at the same time, basically with their
it is
peaks
weird.
around the same time. And it just makes me feel like we're being biased, but I feel like we would be second guessed if we didn't say that, and rightfully so. I think
I think it holds up.
Yeah, I think it holds up.
Who are you going to pull out of those three? Who's the worst? The least best. I don't want to say worst. I mean, it's tough, right? And then
I don't know. Like you can't have a best. Like I don't know.
No,
you're right.
Right, exactly.
I can make an argument for any of them.
Right. And then,
Pedro had the shorter career, and that's the only thing you would ding him about. But if you don't have Pedro on your list, that would be a crappy list.
He was the best at his best, depending on
he's
the best seasons, the best 2 seasons ever. I mean,
absurdly best by head and shoulders better than everybody that holds up in in today's game. So he has to be on that list. And if you don't have Randy Johnson is a freaking whatever. And he got his career later in his career. He was better. Like he was better for a stretch. It shifted out because of his size and stuff and figuring it all out. But yeah, nobody wanted to hit against that guy. I guess what we're also taking away from this is just the beauty of pitching in different ways you can slice and dice it. And, and how we should be kind of lucky to be able to see the guys we see today, but also don't miss the guys that pitched way back when, because there are some studs. And now for today's generation, it's go back and watch some Randy Johnson, Pedro Martinez, and Greg Maddux, and just enjoy it. Whatever you like about the game, there's that in every generation. And let me know in the comments who you think was the best pitcher of all time and why. I think this is going to be a really interesting discussion that we're going to have for years, and we're probably going to revisit after the next season, because we're going to talk about how Shohei Ohtani is had the greatest pitching season of all time, or how Jacob deGrom broke the ERA record, and now he's got to be on everybody's Mount Rushmore. We were so stupid to not let him on it right now.
I will look forward to it.
Awesome, dude. Well, thank you so much.